Here's a quick progression from the sketch to where we are now. So I'm working on this purple and pink cow, and today it's all about the nose. My palettes stayed pretty much the same for every session, and I'm using Mars Black, Payne's Gray, Deep Violet, Cadmium Red Deep Hue, and hiding a bit at the bottom, Titanium White. What I didn't know when I filmed this session back on April 25th was that it would end up being the last time I touched this piece for a while. Not long after this, about a week and a half later, John passed away and everything just kind of paused. John is my, in between brackets, ex-husband and the father of our 5 children. What's with the brackets? Well, it's complicated. There's a lot I won't get into, partly because it's not just my story to tell, and partly because I'm still navigating my own thoughts and emotions. But grief, even the complicated kind, can just put art on hold. Or maybe it just reshapes how and when we come back to it. So this painting, it has sat untouched since then, just waiting, paused, and on hold. And to be honest, I have as well. But don't worry, this video isn't just about grief. I will walk you through what I'm doing painting-wise today. I'll give you some pointers and a bit of explanation as I'm sculpting this nose, and in between I'll weave in a little reflection on the last few months. It's been a layered emotional time, and we're still early in this grief journey, and as I record this voiceover, it's only been just over about a month and a half since he passed. And as we dive into this painting, here is the reference photo. She may not look exactly like it, but that's not always necessary either. The reference photo is a guide, not the law. And I'm finally getting to the more detailed part, refining this predominant nose, the star of this painting. So I started off by deepening the shadows, letting the darks actually be dark so they can do their job and create contrast. I was honestly nervous about the nostrils. I wasn't quite sure how to make them look realistic. Adding depth felt kind of intimidating. Dare I say slightly freaked me out? I've never really done a more detailed job on nostrils before, and these ones, yeah, they're not exactly subtle. They're kind of like in your face. But with those spots on the nose, I am basically just coloring in the foundation layer I put in way back at the beginning. It's sort of like coloring in a coloring sheet. The shapes were already mapped out during the underpainting. I'm just filling them in now, using a round brush to slowly bring things to life. Now, if you've missed that underpainting stage, it's linked in the description along with the others in this cow series that are floating around on my channel. But yeah, what I'm basically trying to say is foundation, foundation, foundation. And that underpainting really does matter. It gives you a solid base to build on, like a roadmap. It blocks in the values, and it takes away the fear of the blank, scary white canvas. When the groundwork is already there, adding the detail doesn't feel as overwhelming. So instead of making 100 decisions while you paint, you're mostly following a plan you already laid out for yourself. So you're not guessing, you're actually building. Well, there's something strangely comforting about that part. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with every layer. You're just showing up and adding to what's already there. And I guess that idea of building on what's already there, of following a plan that's been quietly forming in the background, it kind of mirrors something else. I already knew that one day the kid's father wouldn't be here anymore. His health had been declining for a long time. And even though we weren't really on good terms anymore and had not been in touch for about a year and a half, I knew that this day would come. And then it did. I was working on getting another art print ready to be put on my online shop when my phone rang. It was my oldest son, who I hadn't talked to for about a year and a half and who had been living with his father for the past 2-3 years. I was a bit shocked to see his name come up on my phone. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, is this the call that I knew would be coming one day? Or is he just wanting to call me about something completely different? I was a little confused and stunned. I wasn't sure if I was ready to talk to him or ready to hear what he had to say, and I didn't answer. And about 10 minutes later, I received the text. That was the moment where I was informed that John was in the hospital, on his deathbed, with potentially a week or less to live. And I freaked out, full panic, crying. That gut-level understanding that this was actually happening, that this was the real thing, that the moment I knew was going to show up one day, just did. Realizing that I might have to quickly arrange something for the other 4 kids to see him, possibly for the very last time. Despite the fact that John and I were not really on good terms anymore, I never completely stopped loving him. And then, at the same time, there was this really weird sense of denial. Is this even true? Is this the real thing? Am I being tricked somehow? It's like you start thinking the darnest things. And the thing is, I thought I was prepared. I had a sense that this was the year that might be his last after researching his condition. I knew his health had been declining, but it still hit me hard. Knowing something is coming and actually facing it, those are 2 different things. I called his sister immediately. We both just broke, crying, trying to sort out our emotions, then asking each other questions and trying to make sense of it all while also figuring out what to do next. Yeah, it was something that I could have been prepared for, that I thought I was prepared for. And in reality, it caught me completely off guard. While there's no real smooth transition between that raw part and the painting part, I'm just going to jump right back in as I start glazing this nose. I'm starting to build up around that nostril with a glaze, with a slightly different color value, trying to create depth. Still a bit scary. Not sure if I'm going to pull this off, but you don't know until you try, right? Glazing is kind of like putting on a tinted window film. It doesn't cover up what's underneath, but it changes how light interacts with it. It adds richness and dimension without losing too much detail. This part can be tricky. You're working with transparent layers, so if you go too dark or too thick, it can quickly look flat or muddy. But if you keep it thin and steady, you're basically enhancing what you already have, not masking it. It can be a delicate dance, but acrylics are forgiving. You can easily wipe off a glaze with paper towel, or a clean brush dipped in water, or just let it dry and go over it with a different glaze. But if you're like me and want to nail it right off the bat, use some caution and water it down just a bit more than you think you need. Now, when I overlap the nostril edge, I'm using a paint that's a bit more opaque. Not fully solid, but semi-transparent. This gives me more control to soften that harsh line without completely covering the darker part of the nostril. Think of it like layering a soft veil over a sharp edge. It gently blurs the boundary without hiding what's underneath. That semi-opaque layer helps to create a smoother transition between the nostril and the surrounding skin. Without it, the edge can look cut out or pasted on, but with this careful overlapping, it starts to read as part of the whole face. The colors blend together naturally instead of clashing. Technically, I'm using this slightly thicker paint to feather the edge and push the midtone gently into the darker area, while still allowing some of the shadow to peek through. While this balance keeps the form believable and alive. I'm also paying attention to temperature here. Adding a tiny bit of warmth in that pink helps the nostril feel fleshy and realistic instead of flat or cold. It's subtle, but those little shifts really add life when you step back and look at the whole piece. I'm filling in between the spots on the nose here. You'll probably notice that first wash I laid down is still a little light and on the bright side. And if you were to look really close, you might even spot the grid lines I used early to get my proportions sketched out right. They're faint, those lines, but they're still there, so time to cover them up. While this part is not overly difficult, just stick the paint on there, but not too thick. I want to allow for that lighter wash underneath to still show through in certain places. It all adds to the realism vibe I'm going for here and gives more texture and dimension. And if you happen to overlap the spots a bit with this paint, that's okay. You can deepen shadows again after. Redefine or redarken certain areas. Those are all possibilities at your disposal. You have room to adjust, correct, and build up. It's all in the layers. On the canvas, sure. But honestly, in life too. I'll circle back to that thought in a bit, those layers, but first, let's talk about the brush I'm switching to and why the next step needs a slightly different approach. Now I'm switching things up a bit. This is a bristle brush. It is coarse, stiff, and the tip of it has nicely splayed bristles that are just all over the map, which is great for what I'm doing here. It's creating texture real quick without having to go hyper detailed and whipping out that liner brush. You basically avoid having to put every little stroke in individually and just have a little cluster of them all together at once. And it's not too strong either. Just diffused enough to give the illusion of fine detail without going in with a liner brush and mapping out every strand. You kind of get that messy but believable detail, and it covers ground faster. That's a win-win. And you'll notice as I load the brush, it is done almost straight down into the paint. I don't want paint all the way into the bristles, just picking up pigment on the very tips of the bristles. This is totally different from how I loaded that round brush, which I loaded from top to bottom to get as much paint out of it as possible. Well, this technique is called stippling. Basically, I'm dotting or dabbing the brush onto the surface, layering those little speckled marks. You're not dragging the brush, you're just tapping, bouncing it lightly so the bristles barely touch and deposit a very soft scattered texture. Almost like painting on freckles. And it's kind of funny how painting with layers like this gets you thinking about layers in other parts of life too. Our family is complicated. And John's passing, that comes with layers too. A lot of them. Some are tender and some are jagged. And while I'd love to tell you everything, the truth is, I can't. And that's not because I'm trying to hide anything, but because I have kids. And whether they're watching this now or one day down the road when they're older, I want to be mindful of that. Their brains are still developing, still trying to make sense of the world, still holding on to their own version of the truth, and that's okay. They don't need every piece of the puzzle right now. Everybody experiences things differently. Two people can be in the exact same place, see the exact same thing happen, and still have completely different views and feelings about it. And that's okay. Their experience is their truth, no matter what lens you look through. Well, for my kids, I want to protect them. I want them to come to their own understanding when they're ready. So I'm not going to go into every little detail, especially things that they don't need to hear right now. That doesn't change the fact that our marriage was hard. Sometimes it was really tough dealing with each other. We were separated 5 years prior to his passing. But you probably can guess that there were reasons we separated. And as you probably know, people don't leave their spouses without a reason. Usually there's a lot going on beneath the surface. Now, I'm not saying that applies to everyone. I know some people just hurt others intentionally. But as a Christian woman, my heart was never to walk away from my husband. And no, he did not cheat on me. So yes, this has many layers, way more than I can unpack here. Not just before his passing, which already had old wounds and complicated feelings attached, but also after his passing, when new layers and new pain and emotions showed up. Well, we're still navigating through it. I'm still navigating through it, and it's not always pretty. Sometimes it's tears and snot. Sometimes it's anger. And other times it's laughter because there were amazing memories too. And sometimes it's a song that hits me so hard I just break down and cry. Grief is complicated and it has its own layers, just like life itself. It's not linear, not predictable. You just have to surrender to it and then try to make wise decisions moving forward. All right, back to some painting business. I'm shifting the brush technique here to suggest fur. This same bristle brush is surprisingly versatile because the bristles are a bit uneven and have gaps between them. it naturally creates broken, textured strokes that mimic the look of fur. It's a great way to give the illusion of the fine detail without meticulously painting every individual hair. You don't need to overwork it. Let the brush do some of the heavy lifting. Just keep your strokes light, let a bit of the underpainting peek through, and build it gradually. You can always refine those edges or tighten areas with a liner brush later. But right now, it's about covering ground and letting texture happen naturally. Back to the nostrils, and this is where strategic highlights really start to matter. A few well-placed lighter tones can shift the entire feel of the painting in an instant. Highlights aren't just about adding shine or drawing attention. They're about structure. Just a few light touches can bring form and depth, pulling areas forward and just letting others fall back. That's what I love about this part of the process. It feels like the painting starts to wake up a little. Up until now, it's all been foundation, midtones, soft transitions, and planning. But I like this stage because it's where the painting starts to feel alive. Not overworked, just intentional. Less is more with highlights. Placed right, they do all the talking. This next stretch is all about detail. I'm going in with those tiny, delicate hair strokes around the nose, which may be the final layer, might not. I haven't fully decided yet. That's the thing about painting. Sometimes you don't know what the piece needs until you spend time with it. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, seriously, thank you. You're amazing for sticking with me. Well, the next part is going to be sped up quite a bit because honestly, it's a lot of the same thing. Stroke after stroke after stroke. It's repetitive, but in the best kind of way though. It's meditative. It's steady. Some people call this patience. Maybe it is. But I think it's more about dedication. It doesn't demand perfection. Just focus. It's like a bit of rhythm. Well, whilst that fast forward rolls, I'm going to reflect again a little bit about the current moment that I'm in, about the closing of chapters. I realized I hadn't shared when I actually found out that John had passed. I won't go into full detail here, but I can share a few facts. I was first told on May 6th that he was nearing the end, that he likely wouldn't come out of the hospital again. He passed away just a few days later, on May 10th. It was a very short window, and in that time, I was running around like a crazy person. Family was coming in from all directions. I was on the phone constantly with John's sister, whom I'm very close to, with my own brother, with my mom. And I also reached out to the school counselor to ask, how do I even tell my kids? How do I prepare them for something like this? That part of the story, how and whether they saw him and what I told them and why certain decisions were made, I'm going to keep private for now. But I did tell them the day after I found out myself. I needed time to take it in, to get my own head around it first. It was already complicated and I wanted to handle it with care. One of the hardest things to swallow is that when he passed, he was alone. There was no family with him. And just to be clear, that is not anyone's fault. It just happened that way. Well, he had expressed that he didn't want me to visit, and even though that was hard to hear, I honored that. I stayed away. But when I found out he had passed without anyone holding his hand, that broke me. Despite everything, the separation, the pain, the hardship, I would not have wished dying alone on anyone. If he would have let me, and if it weren't for my responsibilities here with the kids, I would have been there. I would have sat beside him till his final breath. And because we were never legally divorced, I did have to step in right away. I introduced myself at the funeral home. Hi, I'm his wife. It's complicated. I didn't have to be involved, but I chose to be. Not to control things, just to make it smooth and respectful for everyone. for his family, for our kids, for all of us. Since then, it's been a lot of meetings, decisions, emotions. There was a moment when I got the call. The cremation is complete. And it was like, okay, there's no going back now. That chapter has for real, forever closed. At the time I'm recording this, the funeral, or rather the celebration of life, hasn't happened yet. We're 1 week away. But it will have by the time this video goes up. Right now, we're finalizing the service. Deciding who does what, choosing photos, all those bittersweet tasks that come with saying goodbye, closing chapters, coming to terms. It's been a weird couple of weeks trying to make sense of everything. The grief comes in waves, sadness, anger, gratitude, confusion, all of it valid, and all of it messy. And in the middle of that, I'm still doing my best in showing up as a mom and answering questions and holding space and watching feelings come out sideways. I've started grief counseling for most of the kids, and I'm doing the best that I can. I even sat my youngest two down and explained what cremation means. Age appropriately, yes, but I believe in being real with them. Death is part of life. And while it's brutal to learn that through losing your dad, sometimes life just throws you a storm. But I also believe this. If you're surrounded by the right people, you can get through a lot of things. One breath, one choice, one honest conversation at a time. And just like life, this painting is built one stroke at a time. Slow, layered, imperfect. But it moves forward. So I am switching back to the bristle brush here. I'm pulling in another color, something just slightly deeper to add a bit more shadow and give this area a touch more interest. Nothing too wild, just enough to create a bit of visual depth. This brush is great for moments like this because the uneven, splayed out bristles let me build texture without overworking it. I'm not trying to redefine everything here, just softly layer. It doesn't have to scream to be effective, and sometimes these subtle color changes can make all the difference, like adding a bass note to a melody. You don't always hear it directly, but you'd miss it if it wasn't there. Well, that's what this kind of shadowing does. It anchors the painting and keeps it from feeling too flat or one-dimensional. This stage is a reminder that not every stroke needs to be bold or dramatic. You can nudge things along gently. Let the paint grow slowly. Let your instincts guide you more than anything. And if something doesn't work, just adjust it later. It's okay to make mistakes. Well, I'll be honest, when I first started on these nostrils, I was intimidated. I was pretty nervous about getting them right. It felt like such a defining part of the painting, and I didn't want to mess it up. It felt like one wrong move would throw the whole piece off. But that fear has gradually eased off. Layer by layer, stroke by stroke, I've started to feel more at ease. There's still a bit of hesitation, sure, but it is quieter now. It's kind of replaced by a kind of confidence that comes from simply staying with it. It's a bit like real life. If you run from your problems, they'll still be there. But if you work through them, you might just end up in a better place than you expected. I needed to add a bit more texture between those spots. When you look closely, really closely, at a cow's nose, whether in a reference photo or in real life, you see all kinds of tiny little lines. They almost form this chaotic little road, twisting and turning across the surface of the snout. That's the kind of detail that you might not notice at first glance, but once you do, you can't unsee it. Well, at least I can't. Now, I haven't actually painted those lines in. Not in this video, and not even yet as I record this voiceover, but I still wanted to hint at that texture somehow. So I came back in with some stippling. Stippling is a great way to create the illusion of detail without having to spell out every single mark. Now in this case, the little specks can suggest things like dirt, moisture, or just the natural unevenness of skin texture, especially on an animal's nose, which is usually a little muddy, a little wet, and definitely not perfectly clean. Well, that added texture helps to ground the painting in reality. It's subtle, but it matters. These small things add up. You don't always need to paint every detail literally. You just need to give the viewer's eye a reason to believe it's there. A few scattered dots here and there, and suddenly the surface feels more alive, almost like you want to wipe that dirt off the canvas, or at least that's the vibe I'm trying to create. Here's a before and after. And you can really see how that nose has become more defined, if I say so myself. It's a reminder that even when things feel messy or uncertain, progress is happening, one careful step at a time. Now, if you're going through a complicated loss, you're definitely not alone. I see you, and I'm sending you big virtual hugs, strength, and wisdom. Keep your peace, my friends, and God bless you.